welcome to our channel. Take a deep breath and let the world beyond these walls fade to silence. Here, beneath the quiet glow of flickering lanterns and the hush of ancient winds, you are invited to journey with us into forgotten ages, where salt-stained ships, shadowed castles, and voices long vanished still whisper their truths. Let the weight of your day slip away. Settle in. Let your heart slow and your imagination drift. Relax and let the story unfold.
A low, salt-heavy wind groans through the rigging, threading its icy fingers through the rotten ropes and worn canvas of a ship barely holding itself together. The timbers creak in tired protest beneath the relentless weight of gray waves, their bones weathered by years of storms and salt. Dim lanterns sway, their flickering flames casting trembling shadows across decks slick with brine and rust, as if the ship itself were breathing its last, caught between the world of the living and the abyss. The cold mist clings to every surface, smelling of seaweed and forgotten voyages, and the faint hiss of water seeping through the hull whispers secrets best left unspoken. Below decks, the air is thick with the stench of rot and desperation. Men lie in cramped corners, their bodies gaunt and bruised, hollowed out by hunger and disease. Their groans rise like a funeral dirge, blending with the metallic tang of rusted nails and chains, and the sour bite of spoiled rations that no tongue dares savor anymore. The flickering candlelight barely penetrates the shadows where despair festers, eyes sunken, hands trembling as they clutch to memories more distant than the farthest shore. Here, life balances on a knife's edge, measured not by the stars overhead or the charts that could guide them, but by the cruel will of captains whose names are whispered in fear, and the slow erosion of hope like salt eating wood. A young sailor's calloused fingers brush against the rough grain of a salt-stained wooden bucket, its edges splintered and worn from years at sea. His eyes, wide yet hollow, reflect a horizon long lost, the freedom the ocean once promised, now a mirage swallowed by relentless hunger, gnawing beneath threadbare woolen cloaks. The taste of moldy hardtack lingers bitterly on his tongue, a constant reminder of broken promises. Maps, those sacred tokens of navigation and dominion, are treasures hoarded jealously, rare as mercy among this cursed crew. Without them, the men drift, directionless and vulnerable, their fate steered more by whispered superstitions and the captain's wrath than by any guiding star. The captain's voice slices through the thick, stale air, sharp, unyielding, a whip cracking in the silence. His orders fall like stone, demanding obedience with a cruelty born of desperation and fear. Discipline here is not choice, but survival, binding men together with fear's cold grip as tightly as any chain. The smell of sweat, salt, and fear mingles in the confined spaces, each breath heavy with the weight of unseen chains that bind soul to ship. The first bell tolls then, deep and mournful, echoing across the deck like a death knell, ringing for forgotten dreams. The sailor's gaze lifts slowly toward the mast, where a tattered flag flutters weakly, a ghostly shroud caught in the biting wind. It is no banner of glory, but a symbol carved from sacrifice, innocence lost to the sea's hunger, trust eroded like wood eaten by worm, and the crushing invisibility of men condemned by a world that has already forgotten them. Each frayed thread tells a story of betrayal and hope, woven together with salt and storm. Beneath this veil of decay and relentless ocean, the true reckoning begins. The sea, vast and indifferent, waits like an eternal judge, uncaring and unyielding. Within the fragile walls of this vessel, lives hang suspended, ready to unravel in the harsh embrace of waves and winds.
Here, the brutal cost of dreams forged on restless waters is etched into every scarred face, every whispered prayer, every broken promise. As the storm gathers strength on the horizon, the sailor's eyes close briefly, tasting the bitter salt of the past and the uncertain breath of what is to come. Somewhere deep inside, a fragile ember of hope flickers, fragile as the tattered flag above, a reminder that even in ruin, a story begins anew. The sea's silence grows heavy, waiting to swallow all, as the ship and its haunted souls prepare for the relentless journey ahead. A damp chill seeps quietly through the narrow portholes, slipping beneath the thick planks like a ghost in the gloom. It carries the heavy scent of brine and sweat, mingled with the unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies pressed close in the cramped hold. The stale air clings to the skin, heavy and suffocating, thick with the bitter taste of salt and despair. Somewhere above, the creak of warped wood groans beneath the weight of years and neglect, each footfall of rough-hewn boots echoing like a slow heartbeat, steady, unforgiving, a reminder of a cage forged from sea and timber. In this confined world, a grizzled pirate sits hunched, his salt-stiffened beard scraping cracked lips as his trembling hand clasps a brittle piece of parchment. The map is a fragile whisper of guidance, yellowed and cracked, ink faded beneath layers of dirt and sea spray. Its fragile lines weave faint stories of distant shores and secret coves, yet here in the belly of the ship it feels like a cruel mockery, a ghost charting a course through an ocean vast and indifferent, where hope is as scarce as fresh water. His eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and shadowed by countless storms, scan the faded tracings as if willing the paper to breathe life, to reveal a way out of this endless torment. Around him, the crew stirs like phantoms caught in a merciless cycle of labor and suffering. Their movements are slow, burdened, like shadows flickering between the narrow beams of dim lantern light. The clang of the galley bell rings out, a harsh summons breaking the oppressive silence, calling them to another meager meal. They gather, faces gaunt and eyes hollow, to receive their daily ration, biscuits as dry and cracked as parched earth, salted pork turned rancid and stiff, and water thick with salt and the bitterness of decay. Each bite tastes of desperation, each swallow a bitter prayer for sustenance that will not come. Life aboard this ship is ruled by iron laws etched into flesh and fear. The captains, figures carved from storm and shadow, wield their authority like weapons. Their eyes, cold, calculating, merciless, pierce through the damp fog of the crew's misery, exacting order with lash and threat. Discipline here is not a choice, but a sentence, binding the men tighter than any chain could. A single misstep invites wrath, the crack of a whip, or worse, the brutal silence of punishment meted in the dark. The air vibrates with tension, thick as fog, the unspoken terror threading between every breath. The crew's faces, scarred and weather-beaten, tell stories of loyalty fractured by hunger and fear, of trust eroded by endless suffering. They are men suspended between rebellion and submission, each torn by the ache of exile and the faint flicker of dreams long extinguished.
Their bodies bear the marks of storms survived and battles lost, their souls weighed down by the relentless cruelty of the sea and those who command it. In this suffocating darkness, hope is a fragile ember, flickering against the cold winds of despair. Outside, the restless sea pounds the ship's hull, a ceaseless rhythm echoing the pulse of lives unraveling beneath decks. The waves, gray and merciless, swallow the horizon, erasing any trace of the world beyond this drifting prison. Above, the rigging strains and groans under the weight of wind and salt, ropes frayed and trembling like the nerves of the men below. The ship itself seems alive with a quiet suffering, its wood swollen with moisture, its decks slick with salt and sweat, a fragile vessel carrying broken men toward an uncertain fate. The pirate captain's gaze lifts from the brittle map to the shifting shadows around him, the dim shapes of men who share his torment and his burden. He breathes in the sour air, tasting the salt and the rust, and feels the crushing weight of command, a lonely throne carved from fear and blood. The map in his hand is no longer just a guide. It is a symbol of the impossible journey ahead, a fragile thread in a tapestry woven from sacrifice, betrayal, and survival. As dawn's pale light begins to seep through the narrow windows, the ship creaks and shudders, alive with the faint stirrings of another day in this harsh existence. The galley bell tolls once more, a solemn echo that mingles with the cries of distant gulls and the endless murmur of the sea. Each toll marks time slipping away, dreams dissolving like mist on the waves. In this suspended moment, the captain's eyes linger on the dark horizon, a vast, unknowable expanse that promises neither mercy nor escape. The men beneath his command brace themselves, bound by chains of fear and fractured loyalty, caught in the fragile balance between obedience and despair. Their story is etched in every scar, every whispered prayer, every shiver beneath damp blankets. The story of lives swallowed by salt and shadow, of souls lost to the unforgiving ocean. And as the first light of day stretches across the restless sea, a silent question hangs heavy in the air. How long can the fragile threads of hope endure before they snap, leaving only the endless roar of the waves and the cold, relentless silence of the deep? A low fog coils around the ship like a living shroud, cold and suffocating, muffling the creak of timbers and the whispered prayers of men whose bodies have been hardened by salt and sorrow. The air hangs heavy with the smell of damp hemp and stale sweat, thick and clinging, mingling with the acrid smoke of dying candle flames, sputtering against the encroaching darkness. The wooden deck beneath them is slick with brine and darkened with blood, boot prints stamped deep, a silent ledger of violence endured and exhaustion worn like a second skin. Against this dim lantern glow stands the pirate captain's silhouette, a looming specter of authority, dread carved into every line of his weathered face. In the heart of this crucible, a young boy's eyes, wide, weary,
catch the flickering shadows cast by the ropes and rigging above. His hands clutch a rusted iron key, cold and rough against skin too tender for such burdens. Once, that key belonged to a treasure chest now swallowed by the depths, an emblem of hopes locked away by fate and salt water. The night air bites sharply, carrying faint echoes of distant church bells ringing from shores long forgotten, a solemn dirge for a world left behind, a world that feels impossibly far from this rotting vessel adrift on a merciless sea. Maps and charts, once sacred guides, have become myths here. No ink or parchment can pierce this fog. Navigation is a fragile faith, whispered legends tangled with fragmented star patterns, barely visible through the veil of mist. The sea offers no mercy, only the silent judgment of waves that swallow whole those who falter. The boy's breath mingles with the taste of spoiled salted meat lingering on his tongue, sharp and bitter, mixed with the relentless sting of sea spray. Hunger gnaws at them all, a merciless torment that twists stomachs and dulls minds. Every breath is a sacrament of endurance, every moment a quiet prayer to gods unseen, gods who seem to watch in silence as hope withers beneath the weight of salt and fear. The captain's orders ring out sharp and unyielding, commands carved from necessity and desperation. His voice binds the crew into a fragile order, a latticework held together by the brittle threads of fear and fleeting camaraderie. Loyalty here is a currency bought with pain and traded in silence. As the moon sinks beneath the horizon, its pale light swallowed by churning waves, the boy's gaze drifts upward to a tattered sail fluttering in the night wind. It moves like a veil, delicate and torn, a last farewell to innocence and the promise of safety. That sail marks the threshold between survival and oblivion, a boundary crossed daily by souls cast adrift in this endless expanse. Beneath the watchful eye of the sea and sky, the stories of sacrifice and invisibility begin to unfold, silent epics written in salt and shadow. The ship creaks once more, as if drawing a weary breath, and the distant howl of the wind carries a cold warning. Somewhere beyond the fog, unseen forces gather, storms of fate and fortune that will test the fragile threads holding this world together. The boy tightens his grip on the rusted key, the weight of lost dreams heavy in his palm. Somewhere in the shadows, a whispered question lingers. Who will be remembered when the sea finally claims them all? The night deepens, swallowing sound and light, and the ship drifts onward, a fragile beacon against the vast indifference of the ocean. Each soul aboard clings to what little remains, hope, fear, the ghost of home, as the journey bends toward the unknown, and the next chapter of their tale waits to be written in the silence between waves. A pale morning light seeps through a veil of mist, softening the jagged silhouette of a war-torn vessel anchored deep within a forgotten cove. The air hangs heavy, thick with the pungent breath of brine and mold, mingled with the faint bitter trace of smoke, ashes of fires long extinguished, yet lingering in memory like ghosts. Rusted iron chains lie coiled across the deck, cold and unyielding, their weight a silent testament to punishments dealt and spirits broken beneath unforgiving skies. The distant slap of waves against weathered hulls rises and falls like a mournful heartbeat, blending with the low whispered muttering of men whose voices carry the unbearable weight of despair, guilt unspoken but deeply felt.
Amidst this desolation stands a man, his frame weathered by years spent in exile and endless war. His fingers trace the rough, coarse weave of a threadbare cloak, each thread worn thin by storms and sorrow. His eyes, dark pools reflecting tempests both without and within, fixate on a fractured compass, its needle frozen in stubborn indecision. This vessel holds no sacred maps, no guiding texts to pierce the fog of uncertainty. Here navigation is ruled by the harsh logic of survival, and trust remains as fragile as the rotting planks beneath their feet. Each step a gamble against the merciless sea and the fragile loyalties forged in shadow. Around him the men move like specters, shadows cast by the dying light, their faces etched with the silent burden of duty, sacrifice, and promises long forgotten. Invisible chains bind them, threads of loyalty tangled with despair, each man carrying a history carved from loss and endurance. Their footsteps fall in hollow rhythm, the creaking wood beneath a fragile stage where hope and hopelessness dance in uneasy embrace. From beyond the shrouded horizon drifts the low toll of a distant bell, carried faint and mournful on the cold morning breeze. It sounds like a summons from another realm, a fragile echo of faith swallowed by the vast, indifferent sea. A lone gull cries out, piercing the silence with its haunting call, soaring high above as a fleeting emblem of freedom that remains ever out of reach for those trapped below. The captain's voice cuts through the fog, gravelly and sharp, demanding order as he commands the sails to be raised, a final gesture toward a horizon that offers nothing but uncertainty and shadows. As the canvas catches the reluctant wind, the ship stirs to life, groaning beneath the strain of awakening. The man's gaze drifts to a frayed rope dangling over the vessel's side, its fibers unraveling slowly like the fragile threads of their existence. Each frayed strand tells a story of wear and erosion, of lives stretched thin by hardship, held precariously against the vastness of an unforgiving ocean. They stand poised on the brink of a voyage that will test the limits of endurance, loyalty, and humanity itself. The fog thickens once more, swallowing the ship as it creaks forward, cutting through the gray waters with a ghostly grace. Shadows lengthen and merge, the past and future entwined in the mist. Somewhere deep within the hull, silent prayers rise and fall with the rhythm of the waves, fragile hopes whispered into the cold air. The compass remains still, its frozen needle a mirror of the crew's uncertain fate, caught between despair and the faint flickering promise of survival. In this fragile dawn, where light and shadow mingle, the vessel and its haunted souls are bound together by the tenuous thread of existence. As the world slips quietly beneath the fog's embrace, the question lingers: how long can hope endure when every rope frays and every compass fails? And as the sails catch the wind, carrying them toward the unknown, the story continues, etched in salt, shadow, and the unyielding depths of the sea.
The heavy scent of wet wood and spilled ale clings stubbornly to the cramped quarters below deck, where the feeble flicker of a dying candle casts trembling shadows on gaunt faces etched by salt, sickness, and endless toil. The air hangs thick and oppressive, heavy with the metallic tang of blood mingling with rust, a sharp reminder of wounds that refuse to heal. In the dim silence, broken only by the faint murmur of prayers uttered in fractured Latin, the rattling of chains echoes, chains not just of iron, but of fear and unspoken despair. Beyond these claustrophobic walls, the restless sea pounds against the ship's battered hull like a relentless heartbeat, its unyielding rhythm matching the pulse of dread and fragile hope intertwined within. In this shadowed world, a young woman remains hidden, her presence cloaked by silence and shadows, invisible to those above. Her fingers trace the worn edges of a small wooden crucifix, its surface smooth from years of desperate clutching. It is more than a talisman. It is a fragile beacon of faith and protection in a life marked by sacrifice and erasure. Her breath, shallow and cold, forms fleeting clouds that dissolve into the stale air as she listens, heart tightening, to the captain's harsh voice slicing through the fragile bonds of trust. His commands fall like sharpened blades, unforgiving and absolute, carving out a cruel order from the chaos. The crew's provisions are scant and spoiled, their stomachs twisted by hunger gnawing beneath threadbare garments. The bitter aftertaste of rancid salted fish clings to tongues already scorched by salt spray and despair. Maps, once secret guides to distant horizons, have become little more than whispered myths, stories told to stave off the crushing weight of hopelessness. Navigation here is not a science, but a precarious dance with fate, led by the dim light of stars, veiled beneath drifting clouds, and the fickle mercy of the sea. Outside, the solemn toll of the ship's bell cuts through the night air, a steady, mournful cadence marking the relentless passage of time and the unyielding march toward an uncertain horizon. The ropes strain and creak under unforgiving tension, snapping occasionally like the brittle nerves of men stretched too thin. Their sounds weave a symphony of impending rupture, a warning carried on the wind that this fragile order could unravel at any moment. Through a small, rain-speckled porthole, the woman's gaze lifts, catching sight of the pale moon shrouded behind shifting clouds, a silent and different witness to their isolation. The moon's ghostly light bathes the deck in a cold glow, highlighting the contours of decay and resilience alike. It watches over those condemned to vanish beneath the waves, whose stories remain submerged in salt and shadow, whispered only to the night. Here, amid rot and ruin, a story begins to unfurl, woven from the threads of duty and faith, loyalty and sacrifice. It is a tale carved by the sea's cruel hand, a testament to the haunting cost of dreams surrendered to a vast, uncaring ocean. The young woman's fingers tighten around the crucifix, a whispered prayer slipping from her lips, fragile as a candle flame battling the night. The ship groans beneath the weight of memory and the promise of storms yet to come, its timbers trembling like the hearts of those who call it home. Each breath aboard is drawn in the shadow of loss, each step taken on weathered boards, a step toward a fate as uncertain as the shifting tides. The horizon remains veiled, a merciless question hung in the air, waiting to be answered by the unfolding voyage, a voyage where hope and despair intertwine beneath the watchful eyes of the endless sea. The horizon bleeds faint crimson, a slow, mournful wound across the breaking dawn. The sea, mottled with drifting wreckage and rotting timbers, reflects this bruised light, a shattered mirror to the ship's own decay. Salt water slicks the weathered decks, mixing with the acrid smoke rising from smoldering pitch, a harsh perfume that clings to the heavy air. Nearby, the pungent odor of spoiled provisions curls like a serpent's breath, crawling into every crevice and shadow. Above, a solitary raven wheels in restless circles, its black wings casting fleeting shadows over faces etched by hunger, fear, and fractured loyalty, a dark omen in a world fraying at the edges. From beneath the deck drifts the low murmur of prayers whispered in Old English, voices heavy with desperation. They weave through the groans of men caught between hope and despair, prisoners of salt and storm, their souls tethered precariously to the slow unraveling of their lives. The ship creaks and moans under restless waves, its timber straining like weary bones, each groan a testament to the fragile life clinging to this battered vessel. At the helm stands the captain, a figure carved from years of storms and betrayals. His hands, calloused and worn, grip a wheel polished smooth by relentless storms and endless toil. His eyes, sharp and haunted, scan the endless fog-choked horizon, searching for a destination obscured by uncertainty and time. Around him lie maps, once sacred guides, now abandoned relics. Crude charts, hastily drawn and torn at the edges, speak to desperation and fractured plans. The sailors around him move like shadows, their salt-stiffened garments heavy with sweat, their bodies ravaged by scurvy and starvation. Their voices are hushed beneath the weight of unspoken guilt and fear. Trembling in the cold morning air, the captain's voice breaks the silence, harsh, sharp commands echoing through rigging and mast, a fragile assertion of order against the creeping chaos. His words carve the brittle skeleton of discipline, binding men fractured by hardship, whose loyalty is a threadbare cloth stretched thin over a chasm of betrayal and loss. Each order is both a lifeline and a whip, a desperate attempt to hold fast against a world unraveling at the seams. As the ship groans beneath the weight of the sea's restless grasp, the raven's call pierces the dawn, a stark, piercing sound that cuts through the murmur and moan, a reminder of mortality's shadow hovering over every soul aboard. Near the mast, a frayed rope swings silently in the cold breeze, its worn fibers unraveling like the fragile bonds holding this crew together. It is a symbol of all they are, tenuous, worn, and ready to snap with the slightest strain. In this desolate dawn, beneath the bruised sky and the indifferent gaze of the sea, begins a tale carved from sacrifice and survival. It is a dance as old as time itself, where the cruelty of the ocean and the harsh demands of leadership collide in endless struggle. Here, amid salt and shadow, the fragile threads of hope stretched taut, waiting, trembling before the inevitable breaking. And as the sun's first pale light spreads across the restless waves, the story presses forward, toward the unknown, toward a reckoning written in salt and blood, where every heartbeat might be the last, and every choice weighs like a stone on the soul.
Beneath a sky bruised with gathering storm clouds, the silhouette of a pirate ship leans precariously against the relentless swell. The air is thick with the sharp, biting scent of brine and burning tar, tangled with the sour, unsettling odor of spoiled meat and damp wool, a foul perfume born of neglect and endurance. Every groan of timber and snap of rigging marks a harsh, unyielding rhythm, underscoring the muted murmurs of a crew bound by equal parts fear and desperate hope. Lanterns flicker weakly, casting wavering shadows on faces carved deep with grime and exhaustion,
eyes hollowed by sleepless nights and the weight of unspoken regrets. Among the barrels and coils of rope, a lone figure moves with quiet purpose. His fingers brush against the cracked leather cover of a battered journal, its pages stained and warped by salt and time. Within, half-remembered dreams are scrawled alongside maps no longer trusted, fragments of a past life slipping further from reach. The stale taste of moldy hardtack lingers stubbornly on his tongue, mingling with the cold sting of sea spray that seeps into every pore, reminding him of the relentless embrace of the ocean. Around him lie the tools of their struggle, rusted cutlasses dulled by salt and blood, worn pulleys groaning beneath their burden. Splintered planks tell a silent story of decay and relentless survival. From the shadows, the captain's voice cuts through the damp air, sharp, unforgiving, a whip crack of authority born not from cruelty alone, but necessity. His commands are the fragile spine of order in this fragile world, a harsh law enforced on a crew whose loyalty is tethered tightly to survival. Each shouted order is a demand for obedience, a reminder that beneath the veneer of rebellion lies the unyielding structure of desperation. Above, the ship's bell tolls softly, its solemn notes swallowed quickly by the rising wind, a somber hymn for invisible sacrifices and ambitions shattered by salt and storm. Its echo drifts across the heaving deck like a ghost's lament, mourning those lost to hunger, disease, and the unforgiving sea. The bell's cry seems to weave itself into the wind's howl, carrying with it the stories no living voice dares tell aloud. The figure's eyes lift toward the torn black flag that flutters wildly in the gathering storm, a banner worn thin by countless battles and bitter nights. It is a symbol of both rebellion and doom, a ragged veil that cloaks their hopes and their impending fate. The flag snaps sharply against the wind, a final desperate plea against the encroaching darkness. Beneath the endless, unforgiving sky, the sea waits, vast, indifferent, and eternal. It is a silent witness to the fragile lives tethered to this creaking vessel, lives stretched taut between survival and oblivion. The crew braces against the cold and the coming storm, their breath shallow, their hearts heavy. The story poised to unfold is one of shadows and silence, of sacrifice written in salt and blood, whispered beneath the watchful gaze of the tempest. As lightning fractures the sky, illuminating ragged sails and weathered faces for a fleeting moment, the fragile threads of loyalty and hope stretch thin. The ship leans into the gale, a fragile dream caught between the crushing weight of the past and the uncertain horizon ahead.
The question lingers in the charged air. How long can this fragile order hold before it too is torn apart by the relentless sea? And so, beneath the storm's wrath and the raven's silent flight, their journey continues, an unfolding tale of sacrifice, survival, and the brutal cost of dreams forged on the unforgiving waves.